When you look at the bulk of Marvel films, you have to really wonder what Ant-Man's place in the MCU truly is. It's more than an odd duck. The character, like the Quantum Realm, seems to interact with the rest of the Marvel Universe, but be almost wholly separate from... No. No, down here. No, not over there. Down here. No, not to your right, to your left. Your other left. Now zoom in. No, zoom. Is that all the more focused it's going to get? Fine. Hi, I'm big-time, small-time webcaster Dan Umpton, and this is the Doomcast. Ant-Man and the Wasp is an objectively good movie released at one of the hardest points to release a film in the MCU. It's sort of like being a stand-up comedian having to follow a drop-in by Dave Chappelle, or a pole dancer having to follow a sword-swallowing, naked, flaming trapeze artist. No matter how good you are, you can't follow that act. And while it's a refreshingly fun movie about costume people who have super science and technology that allows them to shrink, and reconciling with your parents/your kids, it's not really a superhero film at all. Ant-Man doesn't really save anybody. The stakes aren't terribly high, which is alright. It's mostly the permanent loss of Hank Pym's work, or the permanent loss of Janet Van Dyne that is in the toss-up. Ghost and her story seem a little bit ancillary to the rest of the action, and while what she wants is compelling, her ruthlessness in trying to get it seemed a little less believable because we didn't really get to see her be much more horrible a person than Scott Lang was for the most part. What we did get to see are some great cameo appearances by some presently unsung Marvel characters. Bill Foster, Goliath in comics, also never really gets powers in the MCU, but his death in comics was the catalyst for the original Civil War. Ghost, of course, is largely changed from the comic version. She's a she, but she still phases through walls and uses a suit to remain corporeal and still sabotages corporate America, albeit for very different reasons. There's Jimmy Woo also, although he's a goofball government agent in this film instead of a jet-setting, hyper-capable secret agent and spy like he is in the comics. And finally, there's Sonny Burch, who's a really minor character loosely connected with Iron Man and Norman Osborn. Getting barely any play is Michelle Pfeiffer as Janet Van Dyne, and as the only founding female Avenger, it's a little disappointing to see that she's still never really gotten her due as a character. Visually, Ant-Man and Wasp is full of plenty of action, but also plenty of gags as well. Paul Rudd lives for the oddball comedies and pulls it off nicely. Always does. And while there's no huge connection to the MCU other than, well, that thing at the end, it's still a fun, self-contained film that's fun and funny, and mostly light without being overly silly or entirely full of weird plot holes except for how the whole quantum realm thing works, which I think maybe that's just an existential plot hole. I acknowledge that I don't understand how quantum mechanics works, but is all of it just magic, or it doesn't seem to carry the same rules or logic as Doctor Strange's actual magic in the MCU carries? The Wasp disappears in a Russian missile 100 miles away from the East Coast in 1987, and 30 years later, after being at subatomic size, she's exactly inside of their lab in what, like San Francisco? Relative distance at that size would be like light years, like space travel, right? Okay. Sometimes it's okay for a movie to just be fun, and more about a guy just trying to stop screwing up and be a good dad and ex-con than it is about being a superhero. My favorite part of Nick Spencer's Ant-Man were the silly parts and the heartfelt attempts to be a good person in a bad role, and for a second time, this movie captured that really, really well. Alright, spoilers at this point. The post-credit sequence does show that Scott was in the quantum realm when Thanos made Earth fall and did his whole finger snap thing, killing half of the universe. But Hope, Hank, and Janet were all in normative space at full size and all got dusted. So this either means that Scott will magically figure a way out of the quantum realm, or he was protected by it, or that in Avengers 4 he'll merely be benched again and totally irrelevant, which I hope isn't the case. Anyway, the MCU rarely misses, and even given what Ant-Man and Wasp had to follow, it was really fun and worthwhile. It wasn't the masterpiece that Black Panther or Infinity War were, but it was still pretty darn worthwhile. Thanks everybody, we'll see you next time.